webinar in the 2021 Landscaping with Virginia Natives webinar series. My name is Virginia Whitmer, and I am with the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program. The webinar series is brought to you by the Plant Virginia Natives Marketing Partnership, a collaborative and statewide initiative to increase the use and drive an increase in the availability of the beautiful variety of plants native to Virginia for their numerous ecological, economic, and aesthetic benefits. So the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program initiated and has been coordinating the partnership through grants from NOAA since the first regional marketing campaign on Virginia's Eastern Shore was launched over a decade ago. Plant Virginia Natives now engages and connects hundreds of local, regional, and state partners across the state. I want to call out a few for their role in making tonight's webinar possible. Our Zoom host, Lewis Skinner Botanical Garden, especially Phyllis Laslett and Megan Compton, who have handled registration for our 2,600 plus audience. Helping respond to as many of your questions as possible tonight will be Nancy Veers, President of the Virginia Native Plant Society, Anna Maria Johnson with the Natural Garden, Mary Lincoln with Lewis Skinner Botanical Garden, Stacy Moles with the Virginia Department of Transportation's Pollinator Habitat Program, and Emily Byers with the Virginia Native Plant Society Jefferson Chapter. Thanks also to the many Virginia Native, Plant Virginia Natives partners who helped plan this event. And finally, thank you to our audience. So there's just a little housekeeping we need to keep in mind, and I'm going to turn this overview over to Phyllis, who will share those housekeeping points with us.
Thank you, Virginia. We are delighted to be part of this program. To remind everyone, there will be one more webinar on May 4th, and then we will have a fall series. And this is all included. If you registered, you will get the links to all of these programs. Just a little housekeeping. If you are used to Zoom meetings and are not that familiar with Zoom webinar, I wanted to go over a few things with you. Chat is disabled during today's talk. We ask everyone, because there are quite a few of you on this, in this program. We have almost we have over 2,700 people registered. We do not use the raise hand function because there are too many of you to be fair in answering your questions. We're going to ask you to direct your questions to the Q&A box. And just as in a Zoom webinar, the way you find your menu in the toolbar is to hover your cursor either at the bottom or the top of your Zoom window, and it will pop up. You can click it to open. We will have a number of people answering some of the basic questions in the Q&A box. We'll get to as many as we can. And also want to remind everyone, we are recording this program, and you will receive a link to the recording after this webinar. You'll be available, the webinars will all be available online at Plant Virginia Natives after the series wraps. Thank you.
Thanks, Phyllis. So I am very pleased to introduce our speaker tonight. Elizabeth Mizell is the Program Director for Blue Ridge Prism, a nonprofit dedicated to reducing the impacts of invasive species in the northern Blue Ridge Mountain in Virginia. Prior to moving to Virginia in 2016 and starting a small business, Beth was a land steward with the Nature Conservancy for 14 years caring for natural areas and restoring rare natural communities. Beth has extensive experience in natural areas management and restoration, invasive plant species management and control, native plant propagation, and gardening and landscaping with native plants. Beth is a level 1 Chesapeake Bay landscape professional, and she holds a license as a Virginia commercial pesticide applicator. So without further ado, I will turn the mic and the screen over to Beth.
Thank you, Virginia, for that lovely introduction. And give me just a minute to share my screen and get set up, and then we'll start my presentation. All right. So we are going to talk about invasive plants in Virginia and some of the things that you may see in the springtime. And then we'll also talk about identification, resources that are available, and native alternatives. Oops. Let me get my presentation. Okay. So first, I would like to take a few moments to introduce you to Blue Ridge PRISM, or Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. PRISM was founded in 2014 by Rod and Maggie Walker, working with Jake Hughes at Shenandoah National Park. Rod and Maggie discovered acres of invasive bittersweet on their property adjacent to the park and connected with Jake to talk about it. The rest is history. Most CWMAs around the country are led by public and private land management agencies. Blue Ridge PRISM is unique in that the CWMA, or Cooperative Weed Management Area, was founded and is led by private landowners and volunteers. Blue Ridge PRISM became a project of the Shenandoah National Park Trust, and in 2020, we grew up and took the big step of becoming our own 501c3 public charity. The mission of Blue Ridge PRISM is to reduce the impact of invasive species in the northern Blue Ridge Mountains. So we cover 10 counties: Clark, Warren, Rappahannock, Page, Rockingham, Augusta, Madison, Greene, Albemarle, including Charlottesville and Nelson. We're the only PRISM in Virginia and often work at a broader level to address the threat of invasive species statewide. So we cover 10 counties, almost 3 million acres, to include the 200,000 acre Shenandoah National Park, roughly 50,000 landowners with 5 acres or more. We have quite a big territory. So now that you know a little bit more about PRISM, I'll give you an overview of the resources that we offer to folks interested in learning more about invasive plants from the beginner, the novice, to the conservation practitioner, a professional. We have a ton of information and resources to share with you. And one of my objectives this evening is to arm you with information and direct you to resources. So first, Blue Ridge PRISM offers invasive plants workshops throughout the year. And you are lucky because our next workshop is scheduled for May 26th. So you'll learn about what plants can be managed best during the summer months and identified. You can visit our website for registration details, but you will learn how to identify invasive plants, which invasive plant you can best kill now or control now, which ones you should wait and treat later, best seasonal practices, and using manual and mechanical control methods, and also how to use herbicides. And again, you can visit our website for registration details. And speaking of our website, I'd like to take a few minutes to highlight some other resources that Blue Ridge PRISM offers. Of particular usefulness are our fact sheets. So our website's address is www.blueridgeprism.org. So one of the things that we offer is a series of invasive species fact sheets. There are 14 invasive plant fact sheets that are available for download from our website. And here's an example for garlic mustard. So it's a front and back one-page flyer. And these are chock full of details on a plant's natural history, its identification and control. And you can, as I mentioned, you can download them for free from our website. And we also have lots of hard copies that are available, and you can request for them at no charge. And I'm happy to mail them out to you if you're interested. And then I also wanted to take an opportunity to dig into our website just a little bit more. If you go to our resources tab on our homepage, you'll see a drop-down menu with different training materials, information about our quarterly meetings, different organizations, books and web resources is a really useful web page, and also information on contractors. We do maintain a contractor list. We don't endorse any particular contractor, but if they do request that they get on our list, and we have that available for the public, but it's up to you to vet your own contractor. And then lastly, additional resources that we offer. We offer presentations like this to interested groups like HOAs, garden clubs, master naturalists, master gardeners, lots more. Our president, Rod Walker, has been on the presentation circuit the past month and has spoken to a lot of these groups. We also host regular meetings featuring invasive species themed presentations from researchers, land managers, and other experts. Tomorrow, April 21st, is our spring meeting. The topic is invasive research. You can join us and learn more about using drones for invasive species detection, and also information on current biocontrol and research on biocontrol. Again, go to our website for registration information. You can also sign up for our monthly weed alerts and newsletters. Go to subscribe for news and enter your information, and you're in. And then finally, we're always happy to answer your invasive species questions. You can send an email to info@blueridgeprism.org or ask a question through our website by clicking on the Ask a Question feature. And it will probably be me answering the question. So let's talk about invasive species. And you probably know these. They are famous, or I like to say they're infamous. So kudzu is notably the vine that ate the South. And we at PRISM are deeply worried about the children on that school bus and hope that they escaped in time. Kudzu grows that fast. Burmese pythons and other reptilian invasions in South Florida threaten the Everglades ecosystem. And then the insect you see, the spotted lanternfly, is now in 3 counties in Virginia. And that is a looming invasive insect that we're all very concerned about. And its host plant happens to be the invasive tree of heaven, which we'll cover during this presentation. But what exactly is an invasive species? So I'm gonna throw some facts and stuff at you, and then we'll really get into looking at different invasives and pictures. But this is really important to give you a baseline of why invasive species are a problem in Virginia. So what is an invasive species? So an invasive plant or invasive species, plant, animal, insect, it has to jump over a few hurdles to become invasive, but we're going to talk about plants in this presentation. So it has to first overcome a geographical barrier like a mountain range or ocean, and humans are often the ones who move plants long distances deliberately or accidentally. 2, it must be able to survive in its new location, having the growing conditions it requires. 3, it must form a population that is self-sustaining. 4, that plant must be able to disperse and spread from where it is established, and usually it moves pretty fast. And then the 5th thing that makes it invasive is its negative environmental, economic, or human health effects outweigh any beneficial effects of the species. An invasive species is a species that is non-native to the ecosystem under consideration and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. Invasive species are unimpeded by the things that keep them in check in their native region, like animals, insects, fungi. These plants have no natural enemies here. And as a result, they dominate and outcompete native trees, shrubs, grasses, and other native plants by smothering them, by directly competing with native plants for nutrients, water, or sunlight, by altering the soil chemistry, and or by stressing trees by their sheer weight. Invasive species spread aggressively and displace or destroy both native and commercially cultivated plants and animals. After habitat alteration, invasive species are the greatest threat to natural systems, agriculture, and aquaculture. So invasive plants, they take up space, they harm native plants, and they provide little or no food value to animals, birds, insects, disrupting the locally evolved food web and ecosystem. Most things will not or cannot eat them. And thinking back to Doug Tallamy's talk, the native caterpillars cannot feed on them because they did not evolve with the plants. And deer generally avoid eating them because they are unpalatable or difficult to eat. So not only are these invasive species environmentally harmful, they are also very expensive. In 2005, it was estimated that invasive plants cost the United States more than $120 billion a year. Annually, invasive species, plants, animals, insects, etc., cost Virginia more than $1 billion. And I would wager that that amount is actually higher. So before moving on, it's worth noting that there are a lot of words used to describe invasive species, which are often inaccurate or confusing. And I wanted to share some examples of that. The first is non-native invasive. That is redundant because an invasive species is by its definition non-native. The word native invasive, you might hear someone say that. Native species that can cause management problems are really nuisance species. They're not considered invasive because they are native species. So exotic, alien, foreign are also often terms used to describe people in sometimes very derogatory ways. The word noxious weed is often a legal definition. And in Virginia, there are plants declared noxious weeds that are prohibited from sale. And for the purposes of this presentation, I'm using the term invasive species or invasive plants to describe plants that are non-native to Virginia and cause the harm as described. So let's get into some common invasive plants in Virginia. And I'm just going to give you a brief idea of many invasive plants in Virginia. And while I'll offer some general control guidance, I'm not going to go into specific control techniques for each species. With that said, I'd like to take a moment to talk about herbicides, because I know there's going to be a lot of questions about herbicides. So herbicides, yay or nay? And herbicides are a tool in the invasive plant management toolbox. Some of you may be concerned about using herbicides. For many species, manual control methods are effective with dedication and persistence. Unfortunately, some invasive plants are very difficult, if not impossible, to control without herbicides. The techniques you choose will depend on the plant, the density and size of the infestation, and your ability physically, financially, and emotionally to treat them. And it can really be an investment. The objective should always be to use the appropriate amount of herbicide to be effective. More herbicide does not mean more effective. To reduce the amounts of herbicide use overall, select more targeted treatments and or combine herbicide treatments with manual or mechanical techniques. And then lastly, you should read and follow all herbicide label instructions. The label gives information on what precautions to take, what plants to treat, mixing and application instructions, and environmental information. In addition to the label, find a copy of the herbicide's MSDS sheet. You can just Google X herbicide MSDS and you can find it. And that has a lot more detailed information. So with that, I also wanted to point out this wonderful resource. For more information about invasive plant control, this document was developed by the Virginia Department of Forestry, and it offers guidance on the best timing for manual control and herbicide applications based on the type of invasive plant. The link to this resource is on Blue Ridge Prism's fact sheet webpage. This is the document that we really refer to. This is our standard. So, and now we're going to go on to invasive plant identification. So let's begin with the invasive vines. And many of the photos that you're going to see today will depict what the plant looks like now in the spring, because there are spring invasives and fall invasives, and they look different at different times of the year based on their phenology. So I've tried to feature photos that best show what the plant will look like now. So the first invasive plant that we'll talk about is invasive bittersweet. And some of you may know it as oriental bittersweet, and I'm trying to move away from that. So I'm just going to call it invasive bittersweet in this presentation. And it is a deciduous twining vine with rounded, finely toothed leaves. In this picture, they're fairly large stems. They can reach up to 4 inches in diameter. And if you have been to one of our invasive species workshops, Rod Walker has some great props, and he has an extremely large bittersweet vine that he has mounted. So this plant was introduced in the 1860s as a garden plant. It's tolerant of shade and can be a problem in forests, smothering, and its weight will take down mature trees. I mean, if you have a 4-inch vine that's going up a tree, that's a lot of weight. The dense thicket shade and smother shrubs and native ground cover. And the bittersweet spreads primarily by seed and is moved around by birds. So a couple of ID tips. If you look at the roots, it's really reddish. It's a striking color. So that can be a clue. And then also I have a picture of a little seedling too. So you may start to see seedlings popping up. So the next vine, Japanese honeysuckle, and this is one that I'm sure many of you will know. I have a lot of fond memories of picking the flowers and tasting that little bit of sweet nectar as a child in Indiana. Our fence line next to our house was just covered in Japanese honeysuckle. The problem with Japanese honeysuckle is it forms thick tangles of vines that smother and kill vegetation. And it can also kill shrubs and trees by girdling them. And the photo that I have in the upper left inset is an example of how a Japanese honeysuckle vine twines around a tree sapling to girdle it. I think I missed a slide, but we'll go on. So I also wanted to point out wintergreen. No, I think that's there. Pardon me. So a few control strategies for invasive vines. The general strategy of controlling vines is to control the climbing vines first, so the ones that are going up the trees. The photo here shows cutting the climbing vine, and in this case, they applied an herbicide to the fresh cut to kill the vine going in the ground. But you have to be patient. Sometimes it can take the vine a bit to die because there is a lot of energy that's still in that plant that is going up the tree. There's a lot of energy stored in those tissues. Once you've made those cuts, then concentrate your work on the vines that are growing on the ground. You will see that I have goats mentioned on here, and goats are fantastic. But they generally alone will not control invasive vines. Goats are most effective with repeated grazing periods, followed up with herbicide treatments when the goats have done the bulk of the removal work. So you will want, if you're interested in goats, you will want to work with an experienced goat herder who best understands how to deploy goats for vegetation management. So now we'll move on to some invasive shrubs that, that you may well know, and I hope you don't love them, but maybe you do. Some people love this one. It's called wineberry, and it's more common in the mountains in the northern Piedmont, but it is often sold and planted as an edible, and people really love the wineberries. It's a raspberry, but it's an invasive plant. And this is another one that you will likely know. Autumn olive was widely planted at one time, being promoted as a shrub for wildlife and for mine reclamation. The shrub leaves out earlier than most natives in the spring, and its leaves have this characteristic silvery hue that you can see in the photo, especially the lower right photo. The fragrant, almost heavenly smelling flowers open during April or May. I did have someone on our team mention that autumn olive was flowering now. And then we have the Asian bush honeysuckles. So there are several species that are kind of grouped in the invasive bush honeysuckles, including Amur honeysuckle, Morrow's honeysuckle, Tartarian honeysuckle, and winter honeysuckle. The most common ones that you may see here in Virginia are Amur honeysuckle and Morrow's honeysuckle. They're both highly invasive. Amur honeysuckle is featured here in these photos. Early spring leaf out 2 to 3 weeks ahead of natives and rapid growth give this invasive shrub an edge, filling in forest understories, reducing the plant diversity of a forest. It also alters soil chemistry, giving itself the upper hand. Birds nesting in Amur honeysuckle are less successful in fledging their young. And this alters habitats for amphibian species. The characteristic honeysuckle flowers emerge during May and June, and the berries are dark red. Okay. Just check in with a Q&A in case there's something going on. Okay. Another early leaf out shrub is the Multiflora Rose, and this was widely promoted at one time as a living fence and for erosion control. So like autumn olive and bush honeysuckle, it can form dense thickets shading out native species. The rose hips are often eaten and dispersed by birds. So a few control strategies for dealing with invasive shrubs. There's manual where you can hand pull seedlings. That can be effective when the soils are moist. You can cut them and grub them out. In this picture, these two people are using a weed wrench. You can also use goats with the same considerations that I mentioned before. And you can also use a combination of manual removal and herbicide. So you could cut the stem and then apply herbicide to the cut stem, or mow it and then come back and spray the resprouts later. And so invasive trees, and these are really starting to make a go of it this spring. So the first I would like to point out is the Royal Paulownia, and this is also called the princess tree. It's an invasive tree that's been planted as an ornamental yard tree and in tree plantations for export to Japan where the wood is prized. It's able to take hold after disturbance in a forest like fire or timber harvest, that kind of disturbance. One tree can produce 21 million tiny seeds per year. The Paulownia has showy purple flowers April and May before its large heart-shaped leaves emerge. And in this slide, you can see a photo of the showy flowers. They're actually quite lovely and kind of eye-catching. And if you drive down Interstate 64, you will see a lot of Royal Paulownia in flower. And then when the leaves come out, they can make some pretty big leaves. And I like this photo from Pennsylvania with the hat to give you a little bit of perspective on how large the leaves can get. And I've seen leaves this large on this tree. It's quite a tree. And then our next invasive tree that I had mentioned earlier in the presentation is a host plant for the spotted lanternfly. So this is tree heaven, and a lot of folks call it Ailanthus. So in this picture, I really like this picture. Prism volunteer William Hemersky, he has all of the seeds from one female Ailanthus trees. That's one tree, and that's how many seeds can be dispersed across the landscape. The seeds are really light and thin and are highly mobile, spreading at least a mile from the tree by wind. Ailanthus has smooth bark that resembles the skin of a cantaloupe. And for best control of this invasive tree, unfortunately, an herbicide is required. They will sprout like crazy if you cut the tree and do not apply any kind of herbicide. So at this time of the year, the seedlings are just beginning to emerge with the warmer temperatures. And I noticed on my walk yesterday that the trees are breaking bud. So in the picture to the right of the screen, you see the dormant tree. And if you look at the very ends, you'll start to see the swollen buds, and they will be leafed out very soon. And so a few control strategies and considerations for invasive trees. Again, you can hand pull seedlings of some trees. Others you won't be successful hand pulling. Can mow them or cut them or grubbing. It's all highly dependent upon the species. Like I mentioned, tree of heaven will sprout like crazy if you cut it and do not do any kind of herbicide application. And then one thing that you really have to think about when addressing or controlling an invasive tree is the location of that tree. Is this in a high traffic area? Is this tree in your yard? Do you have to have it actually removed from the site with a crane? Is this tree in the middle of the woods where you can treat it and just leave it in place? Or is the tree along a road or a high traffic trail or area that when it starts to break down, it could become a safety hazard? So you really have to think about what's going to happen to that tree and where it is when you're treating invasive trees. And now we're going to move on to grasses and forbs. See some more springtime lovely plants. So this is Japanese stiltgrass. It's an annual warm season invasive grass that matures and produces seed during the late summer and early fall. But I want to point out, because you can start to look for areas of stiltgrass. It has a really light straw color once it's dormant. It can be found in shady and sunny areas, moist to dry soil conditions. It's in riparian areas, trails, lawns, roadsides, forests, fields. This year's seedlings are just beginning to emerge and may be really difficult to spot. There's a photo of the seedlings in the lower right corner of the screen. They're pretty tiny, and if you not really know what you're looking for, you may miss them. So identification will be a lot easier towards May and June as the plant develops its leaves, and with its characteristic leaves that has just an off-center silver stripe, which you can really see in the upper right photo. You can see that little silvery stripe that's just off-center on every leaf. This is another spring invasive plant, the lesser celandine. And this is also called fig buttercup. This invasive spring plant poses the greatest threat to native spring ephemeral wildflowers. The flowers of the lesser celandine begin blooming in March and last until it gets hot. After flowering, the plants go dormant. It prefers moist to seasonally wet sites and is common along streams. So lesser celandine grows densely and rapidly, outcompeting native spring ephemeral wildflowers. It's also toxic to livestock, especially cattle, tainting their milk, or making the cattle ill. To control this plant, we've probably missed the prime control window. You want to control this plant in the late winter before desirable native plants begin producing leaves. So control this plant while it's growing and active and everything else is still dormant. And you can see in the photo to the left how it just forms a dense, thick ground cover, excluding all of the other plants that may be growing there. It has a lovely yellow flower though, it has that going for it. Another invasive that you can actually be controlling now is garlic mustard. And this plant, it displaces native spring ephemerals as well. And the chemicals in the leaves are also toxic to native butterflies like the West Virginia white. The butterfly confuses garlic mustard with its host plant, the toothworts, and it lays its eggs on the garlic mustard. And then the caterpillars die from consuming the chemicals in the garlic mustard leaves. It's really unfortunate. So they're like a sink for the butterflies. So garlic mustard is bolting and flowering right now, and there's still time to control it by hand pulling. So when you do this, if the plant has flowers on it, you want to make sure to bag and dispose of the flowering plants. Garlic mustard takes 2 years to complete its life cycle, and the plant will die once it has flowered and set seed. Another good time to control garlic mustard is during the dormant season. You can go hand pull it before it starts to bolt and flower, or you can also use herbicide applications in cold weather. So some control strategies and considerations for grasses and forbs. So you can hand pull, as we showed with garlic mustard, and our volunteer Jim Hurley has a load of hand pulled garlic mustard in his hand there. You can hand pull it. You can also like mow or use a string trimmer on, and the timing is critical. You want to do that before these plants start setting seed, like right after they start sending up, they start growing and sending up their seeds, but then you just want to cut them down with a string trimmer. You can use herbicide applications. For invasive grasses, there are grass-specific herbicides, which means it only kills the grasses and not the other broadleaf plants. You can use a combination of manual removal and herbicide. And also you want to consider the location of the plants in your landscape. So with grasses and forbs, these seeds are really mobile and they're often moved by people, water, and wildlife. You can move them on your shoes when hiking through the woods or on a trail. So you'll want to prioritize your control work along trails to prevent further spread. In floodplains, there is a constant disturbance and influx of seeds, so control in that kind of environment may be difficult in some instances. So now you've learned about several species of invasive plants that are common in most areas of Virginia. And you may even have a few of them on your property. You might be thinking, this seems like a big problem. What can I do? It may even seem overwhelming. So let's break it down a little bit. So first, learn to identify invasive plants and learn how to control them to the best of your ability on your property. You are doing that just by attending this presentation. And that's a great start because there are a lot of invasive plants, unfortunately. Second, I encourage you to report occurrences of invasive plants that have escaped from cultivation. You can report invasive plants using a handy app called EdMaps. So I'll take just a minute to introduce you to EdMaps. Citizen conservationists like you are the eyes on the ground to help detect new species and track how invasives spread across Virginia over time. This kind of information helps biologists and policymakers make informed decisions about how to effectively regulate and manage invasive species. It's as simple as downloading an app to your phone from the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. They're out of the University of Georgia. They're also called Bugwood, which I think is kind of a fun name. A quality photo and along with answering some simple questions is all it takes to contribute to this effort. If you're not sure about a plant, there's even a category for unknown plant. And an expert verifier vets the record and helps with identification before it is added to the database. And that's what makes EdMaps a great tool, is because there is that level of verification by an invasive species expert, botanist, land managers that have a lot of experience with invasive species. So we know that the information that is going into EdMaps is scientifically sound. And for those of you who prefer desktop, you can go to www.edmaps.org to also report invasive species. So the third thing that we can do is to choose native plants for your landscape. And we're going to look at some commonly planted invasive plants that you should avoid. You thought we were done with invasives? No, we have some more that we're going to be looking at today. So we've got to stop these invasive plants at the source. Who is the source? It's us, the consumer. These invasive, and I don't buy invasive plants, but it's us, the consumer. So these invasive plants are readily available at Home Depot and other box stores. You can buy them on Amazon, on Etsy, other online outlets, at your local nursery and garden center. And the little things I have on the slide, I just did a search a few weeks ago and found all of these things for sale, and some locally. Apparently you can buy Callery Pear seeds from Amazon, which is troubling. So there are many invasive plants being grown in Virginia that are for sale in Virginia and that are widely used for landscaping in Virginia. The invasive plants that you are working to control could very well be the same species of plants that your neighbor will be planting this weekend. So stop it at the source, your landscaping. Half the solution for reducing the threat of invasive plants is reducing their demand. Let your local nursery know if you see an invasive plant on their shelves. Of course, in a kind, non-confrontational, and educational way. Make sure to tell your local garden retailer that you want Virginia native plants. Their customer is you, and your feedback is important. So now we're going to review several of these plants you'll see at the box stores or your local garden center and consider native alternatives best suited for landscaping purposes. The suggestive native alternatives that I make in this presentation should be appropriate for most parts of Virginia across the mountain, Piedmont, and coastal plain regions. And if not, then I've indicated so in parentheses. So there's a great picture of English ivy that I found on a Twitter post, and the fellow was shouting out to his peeps in the DC area to, hey, don't be buying the stuff, it's in the stores. And so you can still buy English ivy for sale. And so speaking of English ivy, let's get started with looking at those commonly planted invasive plants for landscaping. So the following vines are often selected for ground covers because they're perennial, they're hardy, they're evergreen. When they escape, they form dense mats on the forest floor, displacing native plants. English ivy quickly climbs trees, and the weight of the vine can pull a tree down and make the tree vulnerable to damage during snow and ice events from the excess weight. That's shown in the lower right photo. That was actually taken at a local park not too far from my home. English ivy becomes reproductive when it is vertical, producing berries that are often consumed by birds. The seedlings I'm holding in the upper right-hand photo germinated after being deposited by birds hanging out in the trees in my yard. And I will make a note at this point, I've mentioned it many times, that birds are spreading this invasive species. They feed on the berries or the fruits, which is really unfortunate. So some of the most highly invasive ones are the ones that are being dispersed far and wide by our feathered friends. Another reason to plant natives in your yard. So similar to English ivy, here is the winter creeper I was looking for earlier. Similar to English ivy, winter creeper is an evergreen. It climbs trees and it smothers native plants and trees. Again, birds disperse the seeds widely. And last but not least, for the invasive vines, is periwinkle. It is flowering now and easy to spot. It has opposite dark glossy leaves. It typically doesn't produce fruit or seeds, but spreads vegetatively through rhizomes. And the pictures to the right, I actually took on the neighborhood walk, and I told the person that I was taking pictures of her periwinkle, and I think she was quite delighted by that, but she might be sad to know I was using them in a presentation, telling people not to plant it. So it has a striking purple flower, but I will make the case that the moss phlox subulata, has an even more striking flower. And why would you not want to plant that? So I'm going to offer some native alternatives for ground covers. And I'll just kind of run through these species, make a few points about each of them. And I'm happy to send out these recommendations in some follow-up emails to each of you. But you can also ask me about them during the Q&A. So I have moss phlox, native sedges, particularly carex. Pennsylvania sedge is a really good ground cover. Partridge berry, that's a creeping evergreen perennial with a sweet little white flower and lovely red berries. The wild geranium has purple spring flowers that will be flowering soon. The foam flower, mine's flowering right now, was given to me by a dear friend, and pussy toes, which are also flowering right now. They all form really wonderful ground covers. But wait, there's more. There's so many ground cover selections. Ferns, suggested ferns, a sensitive fern, or another good one is a Christmas fern, and that one is an evergreen. Ferns are the unsung heroes in our landscaping and make wonderful ground cover. So we also have wild ginger. There's golden ragwort, Virginia creeper. It's a perennial vine. It makes a great ground cover and also a lovely vine. But in some of our previous webinars, we have talked about Virginia creeper being irritating. So you may want to put Virginia creeper in an area where you're not going to be working all the time or walking if you're sensitive to that plant. And then one of my favorites is a common blue violet, and it's another unsung hero in the garden. It's easy to grow and transplant, and often it's treated as a weed. And I admit it can get weedy in a bed, but in the right place, it is a wonderful ground cover. And I like to take them and tuck them into little nooks and crannies all in my gardens for early spring bright blue flowers. And it's also a great early flower for our spring pollinators. So now we're going to move on to invasive shrubs, the burning bush. So it is prized for its brilliant fall red color, and it's planted everywhere. It has small green flowers and winged twigs. It is shade tolerant, invading forest understories and forming dense thickets which outcompete and displace native species. It also threatens coastal scrublands and prairies. The reddest capsules, they split to reveal an orange flesh-covered seed, and the birds disperse those seeds. So I had two other slides, and I don't know where they went, but it's worth pointing out that Japanese barberry is another invasive shrub that's commonly used in landscaping. And Japanese barberry is very concerning because it has been linked to the black-legged tick, which is the vector for Lyme disease. And so Japanese barberry, it readily escapes. It's often planted because it likes to, it has red berries in the fall, and it also has a reddish color, leaf color that makes it desirable. It has sharp thorns. So it escapes into the forest and then becomes a vector for black-legged ticks. And studies have shown that removing Japanese barberry from forested areas does reduce the occurrence of black-legged ticks for 5 years from that removal event. Oh, somehow my slides got mixed up. So I'll go to Japanese barberry to show you some pictures of that. And you can see the red berries and the very sharp spines on them. I said thorns. Spoon-shaped leaves, and there's a lot of different cultivars of Japanese barberry. It does well full sun to shade. It forms dense stands in forests, open woodlands, wetlands, and fields. So some native alternatives for Japanese barberry. It offers that looks at that fall red color and bright red fruit for fall and winter interests. It's also really hardy. So here's some really well-suited native alternatives. We have shrubby St. John's wort, a yellow flower. It's hardy. It does well in the garden, forming a dense round form. We also have deerberry, maple leaf viburnum, which is pictured here. And then one of my favorites is New Jersey tea. And it's a small shrub. It's about 2 to 3 feet and has a mounding form with a lovely white flower in the early summer. Pollinators dig it. And the best thing is this shrub is highly adaptable and it tolerates poor soils. It likes heat, it likes sun. So it can do really well in an urban garden. And then I'd like to wrap up the segment on invasive shrubs with this sad and woefully overused plant. So you see it commercial offices, fast food restaurants, to well-manicured yards in Virginia. It's heavenly bamboo, or nandina, and it's not bamboo at all, but it's related to its invasive cousins like Japanese barberry, and one that we haven't looked at is leatherleaf mahonia, which is another really popular shrub that's used in landscaping that is invasive. Nandina has evergreen leaves and bright red berries. And many shrubs I have observed this spring still have the berries from last fall. Homeowners plant them thinking they are helping the birds, but they are absolutely not. Nandina berries are toxic and have amounts of cyanide that have been documented to kill birds that have eaten them. The birds typically avoid them, but will eat them in desperation when food is in short supply. So let's throw away that nandina and let's choose some native alternatives. So bright red berries for winter, the winter berry. It's a holly. It's a deciduous holly. We also have the spice bush, which is one of my personal favorites. In the spring, it has beautiful little tiny yellow flowers that are just, you know, you're so ready for spring to happen, and then the spice bush flowers and everything is okay. There's bright red berries in the fall. And the bonus of this one, it is a host plant for spice bush swallowtail. So if you have spice bush, you are likely to have spice bush swallowtail caterpillars, which are really fun to watch grow and very interesting looking. So we also have fragrant sumac. And this one might be most appropriate in the mountain and Piedmont regions. And then inkberry must be most appropriate for the coastal plain region, but I wanted to mention inkberry because it is an evergreen, and so it may be a replacement for nandina because of that quality. So now let's talk about the invasive grasses that we keep putting in our landscape. And the one that you see everywhere that is so popular is Chinese silvergrass, or miscanthus. So there are more than 50 ornamental forms of miscanthus sold in the horticultural trade here in the US. The invasive grass escapes, forming extensive infestations along roadsides, forest edges, right-of-ways, and other disturbed sites. It's a real threat to grassland natural communities. And then I'll go back. There's some there's all kinds of different forms, and one of them is a variegated form, so it has different colored leaves. And then the photo to the left is what it looks like in the winter. So you can see it does offer some winter interest that homeowners like. And then we also have one that is new to me, but I do see it escape around here. I'm located in Charlottesville, and I keep hearing more and more about this species escaping. It's called black fountain grass. There's several species and varieties. So I don't have a lot of information, but I just wanted to mostly share with you that it is an invasive grass that is often planted in the landscape as a landscaping plant. So don't buy that plant and don't plant it. And so native alternatives for grasses. So purple lovegrass and muley grass are good alternatives to fountain grass. Purple lovegrass grows low to the ground, flowering in the late summer, featuring all these real purplish clouds. Muley grass is a clumping grass with a rounded form and airy red plumes. Miscanthus, Chinese silvergrass, is often planted because of its strong vertical form and the fall and winter interest that I just pointed out, turning that straw color with those fluffy seed heads. So these natives that are below will offer strong vertical form and winter interest. So we have little blue stem. It turns bronze and orange fall foliage color. It's tolerant to heat, drought, and poor soils. We have Indian grass, sorghastrum. It's a clumping grass with a tall tufted foliage, and it has golden plumes in the late summer and fall. And then lastly is giant plume grass. And this is a large, tall grass with tall autumn fluffy plumes. And plume grass may be best suited for the Piedmont and coastal regions. And then the last invasive that we're going to cover is the bamboos. And bamboo is often planted for screening on properties, and it intends to invade areas close to where it was intentionally planted because it rarely produces seeds, but it does aggressively spread through rhizomes. Once established, this plant can take some effort to bring under control. I mean, I've heard people talking about bulldozers to remove this stuff. So one little plant that might be given to you by your friend will turn into an acre, which can be a real pain for your neighbor relations. And there's a couple of species of bamboo and different cultivars. It's just bamboo for this purpose. So some native alternatives for bamboo. You know, you're looking for that screening effect. You can achieve that by using layers of plants to create a screen. You can use native evergreen trees combined with native shrubs. Those are your best options to create a natural and friendly wildlife screen. So Eastern red cedar is an early successional species. It thrives in full sun, it tolerates poor soil and drought conditions. That's an evergreen. American holly, you need male and female trees for berry production, and it's a pyramid-shaped evergreen. So those can be your foundational trees, and then you sprinkle your shrubs in. So some shrubs to consider: American ninebark may be most appropriate in the Piedmont and mountain regions. There's black haw, Viburnum prunifolium, and it's a wide range of forested to open to wet to dry habitats. So that might be a good plant for the average yard. You have maple leaf viburnum, which is part shade to shade, and then the American wild plum. And now we're going to talk about one of my favorite plants to hate, and is the Callery Pear. And like the Nandina, it is so overplanted and it's tired. But you may know the species as a Bradford Pear. This invasive tree species was flowering during March and early April, so late March and early April, and it's easy to identify then. It's widely planted as a street and yard tree. It readily escapes cultivation and overtakes fields, pops up in forests, and often spread by birds. Recently, when I was driving along I-64 west from Virginia to, well, from Charlottesville to the West Virginia state line, I saw this, except for a couple of places along the interstate, I saw this along the right of way and in every town that I drove by. I was reminded of how it pops up, seeing it all along that right of way. And then I would observe a lot of smaller trees in forested areas that were adjacent to a yard or a commercial space that had planted that tree. One area that really struck me was Waynesboro, Virginia. It's an example of how the tree is spread out of cultivation. And you may have noticed it in your own town too. So let's get rid of those Callery pears and plant some other beautiful spring flowering small trees. So these are all short trees because Callery pears they're desired for, they're shorter growth habits. So they're great in the yard for that, but they're not really great because they're invasive, but they're not super tall trees. And then they also have those early white flowers that smell horrible, by the way. So the native alternatives that are here, first is the flowering dogwood, which is in the picture here. That gets to 12 to 20 feet. And I think this is a workhorse of a tree because it offers early spring showy flowers that are pleasing to humans and bees alike. And then in the fall, we have bright red fruits that offer hungry birds fuel for migration. I've seen birds clean out my flowering dogwood in a matter of hours. So it's a wonderful tree for the yard. And then we also have fringe tree, which gets to 10 to 25 feet. We have the eastern redbud, which is, it's a pink flower, but it'll do. Wonderful small trees that are just beautiful to see the dogwoods and the redbuds in flower at the same time. And then we have the downy serviceberry, which is a little bit larger tree. It's 20 to 30 feet in height, and all are early flowering spring trees, wonderful alternatives for Callery pear. And with that, I'll just wrap it up. And so unfortunately, there are so many plants that we did not cover tonight, and many of them have been deliberately planted in our landscapes. So changes to the state law, in addition to changes in consumer plant choices, will be what turns the ship of invasive plant invasions in Virginia. Addressing the impacts of invasive plants is an essential part of stewarding your land, no matter how small. It's an ongoing part of land management that is a long-term investment. So start small, think big, talk to your neighbors, and remember that nature is all around us, and it's up to us to plant the things that the birds, the native bees, the butterflies, the caterpillars, and us humans too, what we need. So remove your invasive plants, choose native plants when thinking about your landscaping, and you absolutely can and will make a difference. You got this. And then I will leave you with a few resources and with the web links. And if you're welcome to take a quick screenshot of that. And if that doesn't work for you, we'll be sending out these resources after our webinar tonight. So thank you so much. And I will be happy to answer your questions now.
Beth, we want to thank you. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation on invasive plants. And I know at Maymont, we've been at it for over 10 years, and we're finally feeling that we are gaining ground on controlling them. And so I encourage those who are participating in this webinar to please just start with one tree, one shrub, one area. You can do this as well. It can happen, and you can gain the control, and just to make wise plant choices, such as the natives. And if you want to have some examples of natives, I encourage you to go to your local public gardens, no matter where you live in Virginia. You've got great public gardens to go and visit to see how they're using native plants. I know at Maymont, we use natives extensively in all of our landscape features, from shrubs to the perennial borders. And, even in a lot of our tree choices. So thank you. That was enlightening and very, very eye-opening to be able to also have the comparisons of what you could substitute plants for, so we can make better choices.
Yeah.
Yes, and I know we have a tremendous number of questions, so I'm going to turn it over to Nancy so we can start answering them, okay?
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Beth.
Nancy, you're muted.
Well, that was off to a good start. Hi, I'm Nancy Beers from the Virginia Native Plant Society. Thank you, Beth. That was very enlightening. And it's good to know there are things that we can do to combat these invasives. It's kind of hard sometimes that we feel a little overwhelmed by them. Let me go to the questions. Whoops, let's see. Got a lot of questions here, so let's see how we want to start.
I'll do the best I can to answer all of your questions. If not, info@blueridgeprism.org.
Right. Somebody asked about Japanese stiltgrass. Does it release chemicals that discourage other better plants? So is it allelopathic? And if yes, what can we do to the soil to remedy this effect? And is there a native alternative? Three-part.
Wow, that's a big question. So I did see that question early, like before I started my presentation, and did some quick research. And the resources that I had on hand, I couldn't find anything that said it was allelopathic, and I don't think it is. But a lot of invasive plants are allelopathic, or they can somehow alter the soil chemistry. So I don't quite have the 100% I'm positive answer to that part of the question. And what was the other part of
the how about native alternatives?
Native alternatives. So when you start talking about like stiltgrass and other things that are really issues in the forest, there's not a really good native alternative because nothing acts like stiltgrass in the forest. So the best that what you can do is think about it as from a restoration perspective. So you have a patch of an acre of stiltgrass, a half an acre, whatever you have. You work on controlling that stiltgrass, whatever method you choose. And then you start to think about restoration and the plants that should go there. So it's not going to be one plant necessarily. It might be a lot of different plants. And you'll want to look at resources that we've talked about in other webinars, to go to the Natural Heritage website and learn more about what native plants are in your county. Go look at your neighbor's properties or other places on your property and look at the plants that are growing there. And then you can start to figure out what plants should be there. So there's not really a replacement for stiltgrass. It's just thinking about what are the other plants that should be there. And that will be dependent on where you live in Virginia.
Thinking of where you live in Virginia, cicadas, the periodic cicadas are on the minds of a lot of people. Someone has asked whether cicadas will take out invasive weeds this spring. I'll let you answer that. Just we wish.
That we wish. I don't know. I don't know if they will eat them or not. I'm going to guess no, because the cicadas have not evolved with these invasive plants that are in the
And it's my understanding the cicadas don't even eat. They just come up to mate.
Yeah. So I honestly don't know a lot about the periodic cicadas that are coming up very soon, except that I'm excited about them and I can't wait to see them. So it'll be interesting to watch if they do try to consume any invasive plants, but most things don't eat invasives, and that's part of the reason why they're invasive.
Yeah. Here's one. Can propane flame torches be used to kill invasive plants by direct application?
Yes, they can. It's not a technique that I have personally used because I have a phobia about propane. And I'm not going to carry a propane tank on my back or have it within, 5 feet of my person. But I know from my TNC days working in northern Indiana, my colleagues in Michigan would often use propane flame torches to control invasive and wetland systems where they couldn't safely use an herbicide or prefer not to. So it's totally doable.
Careful there. Here's a weed that we didn't cover in the presentation, but somebody says, I have spotted knapweed invading my horse pasture and yard. I've tried digging, but too many to dig by hand. Is there any alternative to using Roundup, which is glyphosate? Yeah.
I think that you might want to investigate timed mowing treatments in the field. Knapweed is, I think it's a biennial. It's not a invasive that I have a lot of experience with. I would investigate mowing. And I don't think that Blue Ridge Prism, we don't have a fact sheet on spotted knapweed. I would direct you to one of these resources that I put up at the end, the management guide for invasive plants that might have knapweed in it. And then also if the person who posed the question, if you'd like to send me an email, info@blueridgeprism.org, I can help you investigate that a little bit more.
Okay, thanks, Beth. How about stealth plants like barren or false strawberry? And how much should we care about that? Would an assertive native like they write golden ragwort knock it out? I like to call it golden groundsel because I think it sounds prettier. But anyway, would that work with something like the barren strawberry?
To plant something to compete with it, basically. Is that what they're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you could do that. You could use a combination of hand pulling that plant and then adding native ground covers that will help outcompete that will compete with that plant and reduce it.
And maybe common violets too.
Common violets. The strawberry, the mock strawberry is not one that, I actively control it. I do pull it as a weed in my garden, but I've never really thought about it in like a natural areas management situation. So in the garden, I think you can easily manage it. Elsewhere, it might be, you might have to rethink how to approach that species.
Well, here's one that's a little controversial, and you did address this a bit in your talk, but herbicides can be quite controversial and lightning rods. Yes. Can you talk about where and why they might be the only real option and where they can be avoided? Thank you.
That's a really good question. And I really mentally prepared myself for the herbicide question because I knew I was going to get it. And so where and when that they can be used. I mentioned that there are some species of invasive plants that cannot be controlled without herbicides. Tree of Heaven is one of them. One that I did not touch on is Japanese knotweed. That is an incredibly invasive plant and it keeps popping up. Let's see, who else is very difficult? Japanese stiltgrass, like when you start to move into larger infestations of a plant like Japanese stiltgrass, where you could have acres of it, using an herbicide is going to be your best solution, unless you just want to go out and weed whack it for days and days on end. So there may be situations like that where there are manual control techniques that will work, but the sheer size and scope of the infestation kind of makes that it's prohibitive. I think with herbicides in general, I personally have used herbicides throughout my career to manage natural areas, and I don't hesitate to recommend the proper use of an herbicide to treat an invasive plant if it's necessary. But it is a very concerning topic for some people, and some people choose not to use herbicides, and that's okay. You just have to, figure out what your best approach is going to be. Herbicides kill things. They're toxic. So they have to approach using them with the utmost mindfulness and respect, and also follow that label's instructions, read it front to back, learn about the environmental impacts of an herbicide. Is it going to move through the soil? Should you or should you not use it near water? You know, also, what personal protective equipment do you need? I see so many people out spraying Roundup that they buy at Lowe's in flip-flops and shorts. And the dermal contact, so the herbicide that gets on your skin, that's going to be your greatest way to get herbicide into your system. So when you're using herbicides, always wear long sleeves, long pants, gloves, closed-toed shoes. You know, if you've been using herbicides all day in a forest situation, you take those clothes, you launder them separately. So it's really about being mindful and cautious. And then the second part of that is to think about, do I need to use this herbicide for this plant? Is there a manual control option that I can use? And then how can I work to minimize the amount of herbicide that I will be using? So an example would be an autumn olive shrub. You could foliar spray the whole 5-foot shrub, and then spray a lot of herbicide and have overspray and things like that. Or you can cut that autumn olive shrub and then dab just a little bit, millimeters of herbicide on that cut stump surface. So you're using a lot less herbicide by choosing that particular technique.
Yeah, you just spoke about overspraying. Here's a question about how do you apply herbicide when you have a desired plant right next to it, adjacent to it?
Oh, that's a good question. If you've been spraying invasive plants like me for a long time, you get really good at spraying, targeting your spray. So you can do a few things. You can take a piece of cardboard or newspaper and you can cover that desirable plant while you're treating the plant next to it. And then if you're using like a backpack sprayer, for example, that has a wand and the herbicide comes out the tip of that wand, there are little cones that you can buy that you can put on the tip of that wand, or you can make a cone, and that also will direct your spray more to where you want it. Another thing to do when you're using foliar applications like that is to select days where you don't have any kind of wind or breeze. So when the air is really calm, so you're not having wind that will blow those droplets over onto desired vegetation. In some instances, it can be herbicide selection. So some herbicides like glyphosate, and that's known as Roundup, is one of the trade names. That's a broad spectrum herbicide, so it kills anything it touches. But you can also get other herbicides, like I had mentioned, a grass-specific herbicide, and those will only kill grasses. And then there are herbicides that will only kill broadleaf plants. So some of that could be herbicide selection as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Someone asked, while working on a large area on a hill to get rid of invasives, wisteria, honeysuckle, privet, is there a temporary native ground cover that could be planted to prevent erosion? This person has dirt spots that she's afraid is going to erode.
Yeah, we get that question a lot at our workshops, because oftentimes invasives were planted for erosion control, or they may have come in because a steep area hadn't been maintained and the invasives got an easy foothold there. So when you cut the things back, you will still have the root system of that plant that will be intact, that will help to hold the soil in place until you can get native plants back in. I would suggest some native grasses. There's like annual rise and things like that. Some of the seed companies that I think we've mentioned, and you'll have to really look at what they have. They sell erosion control mixes. So like Ernst and I think Roundstone in Kentucky, but you have to look at that species list and make sure that they're all native species, but that can be a resource too. So I would say grasses would be your best option.
Okay. Somebody's asking about the use of verticillium. I have trouble with that word, verticillium fungus as a biological control for Ailanthus. What's the best time to hack and spray Ailanthus, spring or fall?
Okay, so I'll do the hack and squirt question first. So after June is going to be your best time, and you can treat into the fall and even the winter. Just right now is not a good time because the trees, they're sending a lot of energy up, and all of their fluids, I guess, the water, and it'll just push your herbicide out of the Ailanthus, the cut that you might make. The verticillium wilt is a biological control. That's there's been a lot of research on that. I need to learn more about it, but it's a native fungus that they found, a wilt that kills Ailanthus in it. So right now, it's still several years out from being approved as a biological control. I think it's been found in Virginia. I think it's in Ohio. I think it might have been in Pennsylvania too. They found it. But as far as mass production and selling verticillium wilt as like a bio herbicide, that's still several years away.
Interesting. Can you address the use of vinegar? I know some people have talked about vinegar being great for use on invasive or, to kill plants. And what percentage, like 45%?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I knew this question would come up too.
She's prepared.
There's a lot of home remedies on the internet about how to kill plants: salt, vinegar, other stuff, bleach. And I say that all those things are chemicals, just like herbicides are chemicals. It's just with salt and with vinegar, we can eat them. We can't eat bleach. Please don't. So they're still chemicals. And when you spray them on the ground, there are always potential side effects. When you buy salt or vinegar, like at the grocery store, that is not labeled to use on plants. There is a horticultural vinegar that's sold, and that is a much stronger vinegar than what we buy at the grocery store, what we put in our salad dressings. So it's 20%. You can buy it at your garden store. Again, it's being used as an herbicide. It should be treated as an herbicide. So read that label and follow the instructions. With that said, if you do want to work with the horticultural vinegar, it doesn't do a great job treating perennial plants. So it just top kills things. So it kills on contact. If you spray a leaf with the vinegar, it's going to kill that leaf. So it doesn't do a really good job. It's not systematic in the plant. So it doesn't move into the roots. It doesn't kill the whole plant. It's best to use on tender vegetation and annual plants. So
is that same as like boiling water? I've heard people talk about putting that on cracks.
I don't know. I would think boiling water might have more of an effect, like that propane tank, like the heat is burning it.
Yeah.
I've actually not heard of that that control technique.
I've heard that for weeds growing in cracks in sidewalks.
Okay. Well, it could kill it. The heat. Thinking about vinegar and all the, just if you're going to get the horticultural vinegar, follow that label, use it as it's instructed, and be prepared that it's not going to kill things like Ailanthus or shrubs that you're trying to control. It's just probably not up to the task.
Okay, we're asking for your advice here on how can we effectively share some of this information with local nurseries who may be selling invasive species.
Oh, well, in a kind, non-confrontational and educational way. And just, you can start having a conversation with them if you feel comfortable doing that. The other thing that you can do is our regional native plant campaigns that we have. Plant Nova Natives is a great example where they're working with local nurseries to promote invasive plants.
Promote native plants.
Native plants. No, we're not. They're not. Nova is not promoting invasive plants. I'm so sorry, Margaret. So you can get involved with your regional native plant campaigns and start working to that end. That's a great way to do it too. And help your native nurseries. Tell them when you want natives. You can help them promote native plants. And then if they see that there's a demand and that there's money to be made, they will sell more and more native plants. And I mentioned it's really about turning, that's half the solution is the consumer demand is. And so just get out there and start talking to them. And you might be surprised. They might not even think about it, honestly. They just get, like Lowe's, they just get what's shipped to them, for example, or your local nursery person. They're making a living. They might not really know the full impact of each and every plant that they're selling.
Find out the person who actually makes the ordering decisions.
Yeah.
Try and talk to that person.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
And, if you don't see native plants there that you were looking for, tell them you want them. Leave a card that says, I was looking for, XYZ, you don't have it. Let me know when you carry it. So just so they know there's a demand. Yeah, the native plant campaigns has some of those cards.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Garlic mustard, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
If it's pulled when it's in flower and left lying on the ground, will it set seed?
Yep, it will. It has enough energy in its roots, it can go ahead and set seed. So if it's in flower, put it in a bag and throw it away. And we've even told people they can cut the tops of it. Like if you have acres and acres and lugging bags around, cut the top off and throw that part away. But I recommend throw the whole plant away. Don't leave it on the ground.
Yeah. There's actually been some new research or something about garlic mustard and just recommending cutting off the plant and not disturbing the soil by pulling it out. Though I know it's really satisfying to yank it out and it's easy to yank out. What do you think? Have you heard about that?
Well, there was a recent exchange on the Mid-Atlantic Invasive Plant Council listserv, and I did see a little bit of information about that. So I'm not fully up to speed on that research and what that might mean for managing garlic mustard by pulling. The one disadvantage of managing garlic mustard through pulling is that you are disturbing the soil and you could be creating a disturbance that could encourage more garlic mustard. You're revealing the seed bank, you're bringing it to the soil, to the surface of the soil. Yeah, I'm going to learn more about that. That's a really good question. Sorry, I don't have an answer.
And garlic mustard is also one of those allelopathic plants. Yeah, it changes the soil chemistry.
Yeah.
Okay, to remove invasive shrubs from below large trees, is using a root puller better than digging them out, or does it matter? Like a weed wrench or shovel?
Oh, I don't think I really have a good answer for that. I would think that using a weed wrench, you're going to be pulling the roots, versus if you're digging, you could be accidentally digging the roots of the tree that you're trying to protect. Yeah, I don't think I have a great answer for that question. I'm sorry.
Tough one, yeah. I guess that's good for like hack and squirt or something,
Yeah, I'd say, use your best judgment. If you get in there and you're digging and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of roots that I'm concerned about this tree, you could switch over to a weed wrench and see how that goes.
Okay.
So some of this is really trial and error, unfortunately.
Here's a really important question that, we've been struggling with. What about legislation to stop invasive plants from being sold? Is anything being done to stop nurseries from selling invasive plants such as English ivy? I'll let you tackle this first.
Thank you. That is a really important question. It's a really good question. So earlier this year, you may have heard from a number of organizations like the NPS, the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia, and PRISM about a resolution in the legislature called HR 527. And that resolution mandates that the Department of Conservation and the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, is that right, VDEX, that they form a working group to study the impacts of invasive species, and then make specific recommendations to the legislature in 2022.
With an eye toward, toward either, decreasing the sale of invasive plants, or labeling them or taxing them or doing something to limit their sale, or outright ban it. Don't know what's going to happen yet.
No, we don't know what's going to happen. There are a lot of groups that will be involved in the study. I have a copy of it right here. I pulled it out. So the Department of Forestry, the Virginia Department of Transportation, Department of Wildlife Resources, the Virginia Native Plant Society, Blue Ridge PRISM, Audubon Society of Northern Virginia, the Virginia Nursery and Landscape Association, the Virginia Agribusiness Council, and the Virginia Farm Bureau Federation, the Virginia chapter of American Society of Landscape Architects, and then an individual from Virginia Tech who has expertise in invasive species, and then other stakeholders that are deemed appropriate. So there's going to be a large group of people that come together to really talk about this.
Experts, yes.
Experts, yeah. And we don't know what will come of this. So stay tuned, and that's where we are with this. The current noxious weed law, plants can only be considered noxious weeds in Virginia if they are not being grown in Virginia. So if there is an economic
grown for sale,
if there's an economic benefit, then they can't be listed as a noxious weed in Virginia. So that could be changes to the law, could be one of the recommendations that the group makes. But again, we don't know what's going to happen at this point. So they're in the process of getting Department of Conservation, Recreation, and VDAX is in the process of getting this group organized.
Yeah, that's a really important issue, and I'm glad you all have asked it, because we should have addressed it otherwise. Have a lot of questions here. I'm not sure how to go about them. Here's one.
Let me jump in. I was just it is 8 o'clock, and I was just wondering how much more time Beth had for questions.
I'm feeling pretty good, so I could go to 8:15. I think. I know there's so many questions. So 8:15.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you would agree to go to 8:15. That's why I was just kind of rolling forward.
Thanks for chafing, baby.
Yeah.
I'm going to disappear.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Eat the Weeds events? And if you could address that, have you heard of those?
No, but I'm going to guess they're promoting eating invasive plants for pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. Garlic mustard or something.
Yeah. So one things that come to mind is garlic mustard. People like to make pesto from it. I'm not advocating. I'll just say I'm not advocating for any of these things. I'm just telling you what I've heard about. I had a supervisor when I worked in Indiana, and she was a winemaker, and she would make random wines out of invasive species like autumn olive wine or garlic mustard wine. Like, so you can do a lot of things with them. I mentioned the wineberry earlier. That's really popular for its fruit. You can eat autumn olive fruit. I generally don't personally eat any of that stuff, and have almost gotten physically ill after pulling so much garlic mustard in my life. I don't want to ingest it.
The thought of eating it turned your stomach.
But I haven't specifically heard about the events that you mentioned, but I totally could understand if, you know, that makes sense. Yeah.
Here's a question. How can you tell the difference between grapes and bittersweet vines?
Between, I'm sorry, what?
Grapes, native grapes, and bittersweet.
Well, the shape of the leaf is going to be your first clue. So the bittersweet, I showed a picture, and it had the rounded toothed leaf, and the grape leaf is more, it has more points on it. I don't even know how to describe a grape leaf, but it's not rounded. And then the other thing that you can look at is the bark. So I showed the picture of the bittersweet. It had that smoothish looking bark with bumps all over it. And grapes have more of a stripe, not a stripe, but I can't think of my botanical.
Yeah.
It maybe looks more a little, not shaggy, but more tree-like, I guess.
More like bark?
More like bark, yeah. And then the other clue is going to be the fruit in the fall. So grapes are going to have, they're going to have purple fruits. And then the oriental or the Asian or invasive bittersweet will have, it forms these capsules, which are kind of yellow, and then they open and they're like these orangey red flesh covered seeds underneath. So the fruits of the two vines are completely different.
Yeah. Spotted lanternfly has really come in the news a lot lately, as it has invaded Virginia in the, you know, northern area. So question somebody's asked, where has spotted lanternfly been found in Virginia, and is it helping to kill Ailanthus?
Oh, good question. So it's been found in 3 counties in Virginia, and
Oh, even more now. It's in Prince William too.
Okay, well, I know they just expanded the quarantine area for 3 counties in Virginia, which I can't remember off the top of my head.
Well, it started in Clark and around Winchester, right?
Yeah. I can look at it really fast. So, let me find it, and I can tell you. Like, I really just had that map up on my computer earlier. And part of my problem is I'm geographically challenged still with Virginia. And I don't know where all the counties are, which is embarrassing. So I can't put my hands on that really quick, but yeah, that part of Virginia. I'm sorry. Yeah. And the question about Ailanthus. Ailanthus is its host plant, and if you have Ailanthus, you should take it down or kill it, because it is an invasive tree in its own right, and it can be damaging to forest. And I don't know if spotted lanternfly is killing. I think there's still a lot of research that is being done to answer these questions. I don't think it's actually killing the Ailanthus tree, but we do know so far that the spotted lanternfly doesn't do as well if it does not have Ailanthus in its system, or to complete its reproductive cycle.
But it can eat all of our native trees.
It can eat all of our native trees, yeah.
Can you tell us the difference between stiltgrass and the native white grass? Are there benefits to the white grass? Should it be removed? White grass is native.
Yeah, it's native. I wouldn't remove the white grass. I'm not super familiar with that particular species, but it's a native grass doing what it's supposed to do. And if it's providing some competition to the stiltgrass, then you definitely want to leave it in place. The stiltgrass, the easy way to tell stiltgrass is it has, I showed a photo earlier, it has a very distinctive silvery off-center like vein or color down just off center of the leaf. That's a dead giveaway that you have stiltgrass. There aren't any other grasses that I know of that have that characteristic.
Yeah. When you take out invasive plants, somebody asked whether you should burn them. I mean, I think you bag most of them, or tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it depends on, you want to try to treat or control or remove the plants when they're not producing seed, to reduce the likelihood that you're going to spread the seed around, like dragging them across the landscape or piling them. If you have the means to burn them, that's certainly an option. Like if you live out in the country, I don't know what all of the burning laws are. So check that based on your locality, if you need any permits or anything. But you certainly can burn them. And if you can't, you can pile them in a single area. If there is fruit on a shrub, you can remove that fruit and then bag it and throw it away. So it really depends on what you're treating and then your ability to manage that debris. And again, try to control things when they don't have seeds on them to help reduce the spread of the seed.
Thank you. Do you have any suggestions on corn gluten? Is that used to fight invasives or kill plants?
Yeah, so corn gluten is it's a pre-emergent, and I don't have a lot of personal experience with that, but the timing will be critical to use corn gluten to treat, like for stiltgrass or garlic mustard. I don't know how effective it is on those different plants.
Do you know anything about VDOT's invasive removal procedures? Somebody wants to know, does VDOT have any mechanism for removing invasives, either internally or by volunteers? And this person specifically tags Bradford or Callery Pears along I-81.
Yeah.
So they're also all along I-95,
And
I-64 and everywhere. Yeah.
I don't know what their first protocol is.
Is Stacy on the call still? If she
might be able to shed some light.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I tried to answer that, but I think it got moved. I mean, I do know, especially on 81, that's the Stanton district, and they've been really dealing with the emerald ash borer. So that's kind of been their priority, with just getting rid of trees that pose a hazard. I mean, that's the main priority. And I know as they can, they would be working on the Bradford pears and other invasive species. The priority, sorry for my dog in the background, is really trees or other plants that pose a hazard to, people on the road, and also things that pose a hazard to the actual infrastructure. They do herbicide treatments. But I don't know if I don't believe they have a specific plan for the Bradford pears. But it'd probably be on an as needed basis.
Yeah. You don't do any kind of volunteer invasives removal. You don't have any program like that, do you, Stacy?
We have actually worked with Blue Ridge Prism for Japanese siltgrass, and I know some other projects. I don't think specifically on I-81, but in order for volunteers, so basically anyone that's not a VDOT employee or a contractor would have to get a land use permit, which is possible, and it has been done.
Okay. So who should they contact?
You can contact me. So stacy.molds@v.virginia.gov.
Okay. Prepare for lots of emails, right?
And I'm ready.
Lots of volunteers ready to roll. A lot of these questions are very specific. Let's see.
Maybe we can take one more question, Nancy.
Yeah, does anybody here in the team see something that I really should have asked? Let's see. They're just, how do you pick one?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I think it's best that we said 8:15 and it is 8:15.
Oh, it is 8:15 now.
Yes,
As we're
it is.
rolling through, we're wasting
Yes.
time. But
Can I just go back to the spotted lanternfly? And I did find a map online, and it's Frederick, Clark, and Warren counties that are in the quarantine area for right now. So,
okay. Because it was recently found in Prince William County. I think the extension office just put something out about that.
okay, good to know.
It's
Thank you
slowly
so much.
rolling.
Great questions, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you for your patience in answering them, and Nancy for helping to coordinate those questions. We greatly appreciate it. We're just so excited to be able to offer these seminars and this webinar. And I know that we've got some information to pop up on the screen. So I'm going to let Virginia take over the screen for a minute. We'd like to thank all of our partners that have worked with us on the webinar series, though it's not done yet. We've got more coming, but we also would like to thank our partners for helping us to develop Plant Virginia Natives. We've got a wonderful website of plantvirginianatives.org, and we encourage you to visit that site. We have many guides available on plantvirginianatives.org that cover the various areas of the coastal plain as well as the Piedmont. And we have one in the works for Southwest Virginia as well. So we're very excited, but there's so many partners that have come together to bring this information for you to be able to utilize. You can download the guides online, or you can just read them and enjoy them that way. Or if you'd like a hard copy, there's many locations throughout Virginia that you can pick them up. I know here in Richmond, we've got 3 festivals coming up right in the next 7 days that you can be able to pick up guides from. One of them is the Garden Day at the Governor's Mansion, which is Friday. And then Saturday is Herbs Galore and More at Maymont. Gee, why would I plug that? And then next week on on April 30th and on April 1st is the Garden Fest at Lewis Skinner Botanic Garden. So many options here in the Richmond area. And I know there's many options throughout Virginia as well. Or again, you can just download it from plantvirginia.org. We're just so grateful. It takes many, many people, many, many components to create a successful campaign. And this is living proof of that. We're just so excited to get the ball rolling. So, and then what we'd like to talk to you about and invite you is to our next webinar. We want to thank you for watching tonight, but we ask you to join us with John McGee on The Right Plant in the Right Place on May 4th. The pre-event is at 5:45 with 6:30 starting off and ending at 8, of course, plus possibly going a little later if the questions, deem worthy to, and if John is in agreement. So I encourage you to tune in and to sign up for that as well. This is our last in the spring series. We have more coming this fall for you to enjoy. So check our plantvirginias.org website to be able to learn when those dates are all published and ready to sign up. So thank you. We're just very excited that we culminate sort of the spring series with the right plant in the right place. So as you're out shopping in your local garden center, you can make some sound plant choices. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight. And we look forward to seeing you on May the 4th. And Beth, thank you again. That was a lot of work to put together, and we truly appreciate it. So
Thank you.
thank you.